It's going to be a great game one as we go into round 4 here at YCS Orlando.
Seven.
I'm going to go second.
I'll take first.
Oh, wow, that was a decision to go second.
Interesting.
Robert.
And it's what I figured.
All right, well, let's see the opening statement here from Sathe as he gets ready to play some Mermail Atlanteans.
Draw. Yep. Standby. Main.
Yeah, so it looks like Robert is main decking cards like evenly
that's not
matched,
good for me.
super polymerization, triple tactics, talent, and thrust. So there's a combination
sir.
of cards that make it so that it looks like he's gone into this weekend choosing to
Result?
go
Yep.
second.
Sadly, it does.
We'll now be able to watch, though,
Yes, sir.
Atlantean Mermail basically play uninterrupted.
Definitely does help there as we start off with Neptibus going ahead and sending some waters to the graveyard there for some additional sending. Just cool to see that this deck has stuck it out. And, you know, and when Rage of the Abyss first came out, we didn't see a lot of water duelists just jump out. But now as it's gotten additional support through the most recent set, Supreme Darkness, Poseidra really helps the deck along.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see at least one activation of Dragoons. You know, Dragoons is one of those older cards that's not limited to once per turn, so it's really a matter of how many times can we actually get it to resolve in this one single turn. It actually also looks like, just to comment, a beautiful collection of quarter century secret rares.
Oh,
one
yeah.
after the other here.
Just max rarity. He came here to make, again, a statement.
So we've seen one activation of Dragoons. We're now going to be going into a second. Presumably this will be for a copy of Bahamut Shark. Absolutely. Now I imagine he's going to detach the Dragoons to get another effect, and probably summon a quarter century secret rare. Totally awesome.
Man, he does not miss a beat. Looks like he's thinking about the next options there, kind of slowed down since he got the core part of the strategy out and feels pretty good because you're no longer susceptible to too many effects with Totally Awesome threatening to stop them.
So it looks like this is that single copy of Poseidra the Storming Atlantean that I commented on, which is going to allow him to send a water from his hand to the grave. Oh, it's actually Tias that he'll be summoning. All these quarter century secret rares. It's tough to keep track.
Oh yeah, very shiny, hard to read there, but
This is going to add him a copy of Squad,
Five waters.
Shadow Squad to his hand.
Summon one base. Yep.
He now has 5 waters, so now he's going to be special summoning.
Is it just random
oh
Glacier?
wow.
Yeah, we'll
So
just
time for Delinquent
do this in the roll
Duo.
die.
So one of the
1 through 5,
drawbacks
6
of
zero.
playing a deck that
So 3.
relies exclusively on hand exclusively on board breakers as opposed to hand interactions is, look at that. We just lost an evenly matched and a triple
no.
tactics talent, right?
Good.
You
I mean,
choose to
that
go
is pretty
second,
good,
and you just lost
honestly.
2 of the best cards at breaking
I don't
a
think
board
I'm going to be
possible.
able to...
You know, sometimes if your opponent just establishes a
open
field with
anything I want.
negates and other forms of interaction like destruction or banish effects, 6 cards can sometimes break through that if you have your board breakers. But if you're playing against a strategy like the Mermail Atlantean strategy, that between Mooling Glacier and Deep Sea Minstrel, the combination of both of those cards ripping your hand apart can just be too much to come back from.
It certainly is there as we keep going here, saying goodbye to Infinite Impermanence and performing another Xyz summon here. Haven't
Yeah,
seen the Abyss Dweller yet.
So
Not
we
a
see
keeper, but
Shadow Squad go up to a level 7, and now this is the first time we're going to see
Targeting.
Abystrite, the Atlantean Spirit. Or sorry, Sprite? No, Spirit. My apologies.
hey, it's a brand new
I know.
card.
But we are going to see
Top of the mermail.
going on top.
Some really interesting stuff again. The level modulation certainly helping out there because most of your Mermail and Atlantean Xyz have been historically 7 there, so perfectly designed card.
Graveyard, I can discard this card.
And now we're able to discard in order to revive from the graveyard
Discarding that.
with Poseidra Abyss, the Atlantean Dragon Lord. Going to bring out multiple of the Mermails or Atlanteans back from the graveyard.
Good effect. It's a
Let him
water
back on in.
For cost, I can add an abyss spell.
So now we're seeing some of the inclusions in terms of spell and trap cards, which actually I'll be quite honest and say is not playing a large quantity of. He's playing just a single copy of Abyss Sting. It's interesting kind of going into this weekend, we saw some of the newer Abyss trap cards potentially becoming popular. Some ones that, for example, allow you to draw cards, but that's not what Sathe has decided this weekend. He's just going with Sting equipped.
Well, he left a spot for himself there to play the Abyss Sting Trianian, go ahead and bring back his monster and equip it immediately, but it looks like that's not going to stay on the field too long either. Because I was talking about Abyss Dweller, I think, for 2/4s? No, we're going for another Bahamut Shark. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, what's better than one Totally Awesome?
Ah, 2, that's right.
He is, in fact, playing both copies of Totally Awesome with the 2 copies of Bahamut Shark, so this is about as ideal as you can make it. We had 2 cards ripped out of the hand. We now have multiple copies of Totally Awesome. I guess one thing just to kind of think about big picture is what type of board breakers he's afraid of. And he really hopes not to see something like Dark Ruler no more maybe could be something that would be challenging for him to play through. He'll probably have the Shrine in his graveyard as a form of interaction on the opponent's turn. And Shrine the Atlantean Spirit.
Interesting to see the Lizard Haggardos.
But if his opponent's relying on evenly matched and talents, the double Totally Awesome is just going to be huge. Because he can obviously just negate
Sounds good.
those two power spell, power trap cards that he might be relying on.
Oh, and goodness, look at the backup there. We've got the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I swear I saw an Infinite Permanent set as well, so this is going to be a tough first turn
That would have been
for
really
Robert.
crazy. Say my name.
Well, I think he just drew a Mulch Army.
Maybe a little too late. But he's going to activate something.
Those need to be 4 very powerful cards, and I
We're
do
just gonna
think
play it.
that
We got it regardless.
Robert should consider if he realistically can get through 2 Totally Awesomes, because if he cannot, it might not be worth actually showing the deck that he's playing. But again, we'll see.
Certainly something that you have to think about as a competitor is, yes, every individual duel counts, but you also need to think about the clock, right? You know, if you can't find a winning position now, there's no shame in conceding so that you can just save that for the next duel. And if you had conceded early, you wouldn't have given any information away, right? No side decking if you don't know what you're up against. But, well, maybe Robert still thinks he has a chance, and looks like Ash Blossom Joy Spring is going to stop that chance for the Fusion deployment to bring anything out.
And it makes sense, because he has 2 Totally Awesomes to 2 cards in hand, and he can just negate both of them.
That's a shame, and it seems like Robert has conceded, scooping up his cards, and he's going to have to go into game 2 here.
Especially if you're playing a strategy that's a little bit under the radar, which a branded strategy certainly is in this particular format. If you can leave that as private information heading into game 2, obviously you don't want to lose game 1, but if it's the option of revealing that I'm playing this with really no realistic way of winning, or conceding a little bit early, maybe perhaps the concession there I could have perhaps concealed. Because now the concern here is Robert now is able to go into his, well, rather, Sathe is able to go into his side deck with knowledge that it's one of the more kind of off-the-radar matchups this weekend.
Well, I mean, off the radar, I certainly think that Mermail Atlantean feels pretty off the radar too, but that was a masterclass. You could just re-watch, you know, the video on demand of that duel and really understand how much bounce of the ounce you can get out of the new water cards. And, you know, it shows that there are a lot of decks. I know I said that earlier. We're trying to give you hope, not cope, because in the tournament, we've still seen people doing well with things like Azamina White Forest, obviously Mermail Atlantean. We got to see Tenpai recently. There's even some Mimigul duelists who are hanging on. So a lot of different strategies, but we'll have to see what rises up as we continue through the tournament.
Yeah, looking at just kind of the way Sathe has built his Mermail Atlantean deck, I'm really impressed by the fact that he's been able to incorporate, you know, multiple copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Fuwalos, 3 copies of Corellia, plus Infinite Impermanence, plus Dominus Impulse. He actually has a pretty robust and interaction lineup you might not necessarily always see in some of these Atlantean Mermail strategies. You know, going into the weekend, there were some packages like the Exegard with the new critical counter trap that some players have been incorporating into these strategies. But when you incorporate a card like critical, the counter trap, you're adding a card that you don't necessarily want to draw. So by cutting back on some of those cards and instead of maybe increasing the ceiling, kind of just sticking to the main game plan of these Mermail Atlanteans are probably good enough. And if I cut back on some of these less than desirable draws, I can fit more of these non-engine cards into my deck like Ash Blossom, and it might give me a little bit more flexibility when I have to go second. Because clearly we just saw there that when this deck goes first, in uninterrupted, which is a little bit unique from the specific branded strategy, but uninterrupted, the Mermail Atlanteans can stick with any deck out there right now.
You certainly can. That is just an incredible showing there. But now it's going to be interesting to see if Robert chooses to go first or second, right? He clearly is comfortable going second, but he just got to see the full power of, again, uninterrupted Mermails and Atlanteans. And branded players, you're right, they do have to focus mostly on engines. So as he just quietly shuffles to himself there, he's going to have to think, okay, what do I do? What do I do?
I'm curious if he's going to choose to go second again. It's really difficult, specifically against Mulan Glacia, to choose to go second again.
All right, so players standing by. Going to go ahead and get their hands ready.
He has 3 Solemn Judgments in his side deck, Robert does, our branded player. I have to assume that because those are in his deck, he is conceding that he will eventually have to go first. And in doing so, maybe potentially here in this game, knowing that Mulan Glacia is such a big threat, he will actually elect to go first, which is counterintuitive relative to what we saw in the previous game.
Paying 4,000 life points to keep options in your hand like evenly matched. That's honestly a decent deal.
Yeah, he can easily cut his evenly matched. He could potentially cut his triple tactics count down a little bit. Obviously, the 6 small charmers he's playing, he needs to cut. But we'll see. It'll be very soon for us to find out whether or not he's going first or second.
All right, well, we're getting here into game 2 against round 4. Day is not even halfway over.
All right. Good luck, boss.
Good luck.
Oh.
Drop it. Yeah.
Well, it actually looks like here that Sathe has a copy of Mulcharmy.
Sure.
Looks like Fualos.
We'll go
So
standby. Yep.
that does indicate that he intended on Robert going first.
Normal summon.
There's always that question back and forth of who is going to go first after somebody elects to go second in game one. So it's interesting to see that Fualos, which would have obviously not been an ideal draw had he been required to go first, here actually mattering quite a bit. But it looks like our branded player Robert is going to begin with Guiding Quem the Virtuous. It's one of my favorite kind of branded Despia-based cards.
Certainly is. Ecclesia's understudy there is just as powerful. And interesting that, you know, with Sathe, they mentioned he was a prosecuting attorney, so he's really following the game plan and applying it to dueling. It's one thing to know how to play your own deck. It's another to know how your opponent plays. But then to go one step further to know your opponent is electing to go first after they saw that strong showing. Good stuff.
So this gives off the indication to me that he potentially has access to a Serenir effect, which can be done a few different ways in the branded strategy in order to dump the Retribution to the graveyard to add the fusion back to his hand. You know, that's one of the main reasons why you would be sending it. Okay, this is alternatively another pathway forward. The thrust setting the fusion deployment. Oh, sorry, duplication.
Duplication, yeah. Makes sense, though. I mean, he didn't get to branded fusion this turn. Why not try next turn?
Usually an indicator that his hand's actually a little bit weaker than maybe he would have wanted. That's kind of unfortunate.
Ooh, so this is down to the wire. There's a possibility the duel could end right here if Sathe is able to just clear the field and just pounce through with his water monsters. So let's see what Mermail Atlanteans has in store.
His hand is either weaker or he elected just not to give him any Fualos draws, which also would make a lot of sense here. But here we have one of the original Mermails, Abyss Spike, discarding the Shadow Squad, which is going to allow him to search a level 3.
Or lower mermail or anything.
Let's go. Let's think here. Yeah, that's fine.
Robert deciding to let it go, but almost telegraphing that he may have a reaction of some kind.
Yeah, certainly it seemed like he was about to say that something was going to happen there, but he's allowing both of these effects to resolve. So we have Bishrine, and then we have to the field, Neptibus.
Yeah, let's see if the Prince can become the King of Atlantia here. Looks like we're going to go ahead and use the effect. Sending for cost.
Of course, Dragoons. Activation number 1 of Dragoons this turn.
Well, this might be a turn where he definitely has to use it multiple times. Those face-down cards could still be threatening. We know at least one of them is fusion duplication, so it's all about the timing.
We're going to negate this again.
Okay.
I don't know why
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't try
we
Brigade
don't.
Courier just yet. So seeing a little bit into the future of Robert there, he clearly wants to use fusion duplication in order to bring out a fusion monster, including Fallen of Valbaz, and then use the Tri-Brigade
No,
Mercourier.
understandable. Yeah.
But nothing's happened
no.
yet except giving a little bit of information away, so he's got to keep those nerves in check if he's going to proceed.
It's actually a pretty big piece of information, all things considered, because the branded Despia deck doesn't typically have a lot of hand interactions, except literally that one card, I guess minus the Bystials, but the Bystials against a water-based deck aren't necessarily ideal interactions anyway. So that is honestly just about the only card in his hand that could be giving away information here.
Well, he might have a Bystial technically if he was able to resolve fusion duplication, use the brand of fusion, get some light and darks in the graveyard, and his opponent does control monsters. But you're right that Tri-Brigade Mercourier is huge, and it's going to maybe give a little bit of insight for Sathe to change his game plan here.
On res, we're going to
Oh, it seems like now's the time.
have to go. So it's going to copy the effect. Yeah.
We're going to try to use the effect to copy Brand of Fusion here.
I will say that is one of my favorite
just copy.
pieces of new technology in the branded strategy. It's been around a little bit while now, but I remember when that card first was printed, Fusion Duplication, one of my close friends is a huge fan of branded. And I asked him, like, are you playing the new card from the set? He's like, well, I don't think there are any new cards. And said, I'm like, oh, are you sure? Have you read this one? You have Thrust in your deck. And his mind, he was just so excited.
Well, speaking of excited, unfortunately, Robert is going to get a small procedural reminder for the illegal activation of the Tri-Brigade Mercourier, but that's just a warning, but just to keep you guys in the know.
Summon the Albion.
All right, but we are going to bring out Albion here, so it might be time for some fusion. So Albion is going to be Chain Link 1, Guiding Quem is going to be Chain Link 2.
Yep, so this will bring back the Blazing Cartasia from the graveyard. So he's actually threatening multiple fusion summons. What's
Card has left the entry.
sometimes annoying just in general is it's really awesome to be able to kind of use Albion and then chain Cartasia if Cartasia is on the field, and then kind of be able to sort of double up the fusion summoning. It's just simply not how the turn played out,
Okay. Second.
but are some of the kind of interesting interactions that this type of strategy
Then
can
we'll
sometimes
resolve
do.
the Albion.
So Albion, looks like goodbye Fallen of Albaz, and the other material is that Tri-Brigade McCurry. Okay, might as well give it up since we know it's there.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know if the threat of it is worth more, but I guess
We'll go chain link
we don't
one
have full
Rebellion,
information.
center cost. Chain link 2 McCurrier to search since he was banished.
Oh, that's fair. Getting additional resources there to maybe really push during the sort of opening of the game state and fuse and fuse and fuse. So this time adding Albion the Shrouded Dragon from the deck to the hand. And it could be using that as a fusion material right now. Maybe Light and Darkness Dragon Lord could be coming our way. I mean, the fusion materials are definitely out there.
Already used the Cartesia, so we'll send back this Albaz and we'll send back this Cartesia. Or Quinn.
Oh, okay, something different this time. Albaz and Cartesia making
Sanctifier.
Sanctifier.
Without its best friends.
In a new chain now?
I mean, it's been a while, but yes, Gimmick Puppets will do anything for their fans. But what instead is he going to use the effect here? Maybe bring back Fallen of Albaz to try to fuse one of his opponent's monsters. There's not a lot of intersection there with water monsters, that's for sure.
He does play Edo, the Supreme Magical Force.
Oh!
So he doesn't quite yet have one of the best friends in the graveyard, but
That
that
would be-
soon could be happening here.
It would be tough for sure.
Because what we're going to see here is the Granganol hit the field. And then our friend Granganol.
Oh, wow. So finding another back end into this doorway, right? Being able to open up the deck, send Edo, the Supreme Magical Being, to the graveyard. See if you're right here as it goes into the deck.
Oh, he went first this game.
Oh, yeah, there's the Edo.
What is even more fascinating is this, it was in fact in his main deck, Edo, the Supreme Magical Force, which is typically something that you would see if you wanted to go first, even though in the first game he won the Dar roll and elected to go second. So maybe his plan is to break the board and then Edo on essentially the third turn of the game, and then actually conduct the attacks necessary to win on the fourth turn.
Like a little
But
checkmate. Oh,
Oh,
the Dominus Impulse at just the right time.
what an interesting interaction there. We have the Impulse from hand with a Solemn Judgment to negate it, and now we have Edo on board, which is going to lock out Sathe.
Safe just saying objection, Your Honor, and unfortunately Robert had a response, so the Solemn Judgment will cut that off and make Edo lock this water turn completely down because, well, you're not summoning any monsters anymore.
At least he had the courtesy of using a Quarter Century Secret to match the rest of his deck.
He planned it just for this. This is
Yes.
the high rarity, Edo, so that your deck doesn't lower its standards, right? Jokes aside here, though, it looks like we are going to enter the battle phase, and just a little peck on the cheek there from Abyss Spike.
See, the problem is this loop here is going to just allow him to attack the Edo and then
Let's go send to the graveyard.
kind of continue on this process.
Certainly makes sense, and I know a lot of Branded fans, they exist out there, and they're probably cheering at the screen as hard as they can.
Right? You would think you could just shift the Edo to attack mode and attack into an attack position monster on the next turn when you're able to shift it, but then just it's just special summon back again. So
Can't get
this
rid
is
of it.
a very difficult sort of lock to break out of, especially because Sanctifier has protection itself.
I'm going to just...
I do really love the Branded strategy because, and I'm sure I'm going to get some flack from the chat on this, it feels like medieval hero, right? It's a very fusion-centric strategy that is mostly engine in the deck and trying its best to squeak out a win no matter what. And that's exactly what Robert is doing here, using the fusion duplication, getting the Branded fusion. Look at all those fusions that he didn't even summon during his own turn.
I will say I loved some of the early iterations of Branded that relied on Guardian Chimera.
Oh,
Just that, branded it red, bringing back Guardian Chimera, the advantage that you would generate there. That was kind of right after the Fallen of Albaz structure deck had been printed, right after some of those early variations of the deck, before maybe we had Sanctifier and some of the latter Fallen of Albaz fusion monsters. Kind of remind me a little bit of almost Gladiator Beast Gyzarus, that multiple destroy effects on your opponent's turn.
Oh, well, looks like we're actually going to concede here and move on to the next game.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you.
Duelists chatting amongst themselves. Just like,
really
I don't blame you.
Quite something to see that just Quem set duplication was a sufficient enough combination of cards. I was thinking that maybe perhaps he was going to activate Serenair. Sometimes you see Branded in High Spirits, which Robert only has one copy of. They can get that Serenair into the graveyard, which then dumps the Retribution that you can then banish to add the fusion back. But no, it in the graveyard with duplication, with a Quem on field, was sufficient enough to actually still establish Edo, the Supreme Magical Force.
Now both duelists kind of locked in here. They know that they're capable. That's what I love about Game 3. It is best 2 out of 3, and sometimes it is just 2-0. But when both duelists not only know each other's decks, but get sort of a peek at what it looks like as a good day to be them, right? You know, when you could fuse all that stuff and push your opponent out with the Ito, the Supreme Magical Being, or in the same way, from Sathe's perspective, just rain down those water monsters. And we're going to be in for a good one here, but I'm curious to see as Sathe is too as he looks out to the crowd.
So in terms of kind of the strategy for Sathe, this is great for him. He's playing 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet in his side deck, which if they were not in that previous game are absolutely going to come in now. One of the, you know, you'd look at Ito and you'd look at, let's say, Gimmick Puppet, and you'd say, well, it's basically the same thing. There are a few exceptions. If you can get rid of the Ito from your field, it eliminates the restriction that is placing on you. Whereas with Gimmick Puppet, it creates this lingering effect. There's just nothing you can do. Forbidden Droplet, paying the cost, can send the Ito to the graveyard. In addition to that, it would just also allow you to negate an otherwise untargetable Sanctifier. So the fact that he has Droplet in his side deck, if perhaps was not in his deck in the previous game, it is absolutely entering into his deck here. And you have to imagine, after seeing the Blazing Cartesia in Game 1, that you would assume that your opponent was playing this type of strategy, because Ito really is the most logical replacement for the lost Gimmick Puppet. But if it wasn't in there in the second game, it is assuredly going to be in there, even going first here. Those droplets are going in because it just gives you that backup plan in case Ito hits the board again, in which you might otherwise not really have a realistic out.
The Forbidden Droplet has certainly been a boon to a lot of different duelists, and it comes in and out of the format, but there's just been some very creative use cases here lately, and this is no exception, right? I think I'm going to end up starting to use that card again more. But duelists are just kind of locked in, waiting here, just the calm before the storm, right? The rage of the abyss that is the mermail gameplay. It's possible that if Sathe chooses to go first and just gets to play uninterrupted again, we could see a Mulan Glacia rip the chances away.
Yeah, he is definitely going to choose to go first here because of that aspect of his strategy. I mean, he also has Dimensional Barrier in his side deck, which, since the moment Branded was printed, has been a great side deck choice.
Just call Fusion, and unless they're splashing in some rituals or something with the Dogmatica package, there may not be any hope.
I think we're going to see potentially a Minstrel, which is another one of just the really powerful opening plays out of these water-based strategies, allowing a peek at the opponent's hand. I don't know if that's a Dragoons that's going to be oh, it absolutely is. So he's main decking 1 copy of Deep Sea Minstrel and siding 2 additional copies. Makes sense that when you go first, you want to bump it up to 3, get a nice look at your opponent's hand.
Speaking of which, all gas, no brakes.
Yeah, it's all engine. There's that Call by the Grave. That's a little bit more protective. I could imagine, just because of the redundancy. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. That hand doesn't do anything that you can't deal with naturally, especially because you're going to potentially get 2 more rips with Mulan Glacia this turn. So by getting rid of the Albion, you're hedging against a fresh draw. You know, your opponent's going to draw for their turn naturally. This way, there's only 1 unknown card. This could have potentially entered into the next turn where there are multiple unknown cards. So I really like getting that over there for right now.
Yeah, definitely some great insight.
You don't want it in the graveyard for Mulan Glacia. It actually has some type of incremental effect.
Yeah, you certainly don't want them to be able to send any cards from their deck to the graveyard, because that could be anything that could really harm Sathe's chances here. But he's doing great as he continues play here, takes a brief pause to think about what's next. Obviously, waters in the graveyard are important here, but let's go back in the deck and see what else we can grab. All right, so we're going to go ahead. Oh, and there it is. Uh-oh. Mulan Glacia is back, and there's 4 waters. Let's see if we can get a 5th. There's 6 technically right now.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that. The water deck can manipulate the numbers with ease.
Probably like the strongest graveyard manipulation for numbers like that since Dark Arm Dragon back in the day, but that was then, this is now. Let's see what we got.
So now we see 5, but he's going to elect to go into Bahamut Shark. Potentially is valuing putting Toad on the field. No, he actually just knows the hand. He doesn't even need to. He's just going to summon the Mulan Glacia. This is great because it actually gives him the information of what the 2 cards are that will be hit. That way he can kind of plan out the rest of his turn accordingly.
That one twice.
So he's keeping the order here. 4. Okay, there we go. There's our cards. It looks like, what are we losing?
Yep.
Ooh, a Luber. That's going to hurt.
So Call By and Branded Fusion. So
and that's still good. That sounds like a great Branded start, but with the Toad out there, maybe not so much.
No, this is gonna check. Well, I will say the Call by the Grave can actually stop Totally Awesome, so he's gonna need to establish double Totally Awesome so that he can Totally Awesome the Branded Fusion and then Totally Awesome the Call by the Grave on the Totally Awesome.
So Totally Awesome, so you can Totally Awesome with your Totally Awesome. Got it.
Yeah, we need double Totally Awesome layers here, but I don't think that that's gonna be much of a difficulty based on what we saw in Game 1. Now this is Dragoons. resolving. We got Bistius. Sending away Poseidra. Storming Atlantean.
Quest continues here.
He's going to put Abishai to his hand. Now we're going to potentially link summon.
And to a degree, Robert, as he stares down at this field, really has to be thinking, okay, what cards could I draw that could actually get through this when I've just got Branded Fusion and Called by the Grave? It's going to be pretty difficult, especially if there's that second Totally Awesome, and I think that is the direction we're headed. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, we have Coral bringing back the Shadow Squad. Looks like he actually naturally drew the Abyss Sting, so he won't be able to search it sort of for free throughout this turn, but I don't think that that's going to matter too much.
Not at the level in which he's gaining resources here.
So now he's using the Shadow in order to raise its level to 7 so that it can match.
Angel Gonzalez. Jason Jeffrey Leonard and Miguel Angel Gonzalez. Please come up to see the judges at the main event stage.
Just piling it on. Oh, and then immediately link summoning off too. Interesting, just to pile the water monsters in the graveyard there. But
Yeah, he's
worth
able
it.
to trigger the discard for 3 by doing this.
Again, Robert just fusion materials and a prayer. Could be Dark Roller no more, right? Maybe something he's looking forward to, or some other board-breaking card that just cannot be stopped. As he stares down Mermail King Neptibus, just waiting for what's next. Gang's all here, just terminating chain links. Gonna do chain link 1 is going to be the King Neptibus. Ooh. So did lose a Dominus Impulse there, but may not even be necessary.
Yeah, I think he's going to have enough just without any additional points of interaction like Impulse, especially because he has the Toad.
Well, he is keeping this turn going as he tries to prove his deck beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's just a matter of getting that second Toad on the field, like I mentioned, because he actually just outright knows the 2 cards in hand.
It's a reborn.
So definitely got the Abyss Sting back, which is helpful. And going to go ahead and free up a Monster Zone here as he exceed. No, Link summons, okay.
You know, and he was able to exceed summon earlier in the turn with Milling Glacia. Ooh, oh no. I think he may have just realized a mistake just based on his body language.
Not feeling quite as strong, you're right.
So now here comes the Sting, which is going to allow him to special summon back. Probably going to be another level 4. Yeah, okay. So now here's going to be another copy of Bahamut Shark, you have to imagine. Okay,
Toad to Toad.
Yep, now here's the second Toad.
It does show you the power of 2 Totally Awesomes for sure. Like, you understand what the checkmate of this deck can be.
Is that just a follow-up Neptibus? Yep. I was curious if he was going to find a way to kind of compensate for that Albion that's going to return back during the end phase.
It's like a Hazard Ligados for the draw again. And one more. Didn't quite see what it was.
Ooh, it looks like it may have been an Impermanence.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I mean, obviously, you got to set it at this point, but just going to move our banishments over there so that they don't get mixed up. Seems like we set the Imperm.
So he's done what we wanted, which is that double Toad. I guess the Albion now is going to return to hand. Yeah, so there is the potential now. You know, I said that it could cut off his draws. With it returning back to his hand, he actually is now going to be able to use that to draw a new fresh card.
All right, Robert, let's see. Show us the power of Fallen of Albaz.
Sometimes these strategies can find ways of actually getting that banished card out of the banished pile. It wasn't the case here. And Albion is going to be able to send that Retribution for potentially free value and a fresh draw. So it really comes down here to what these 2 new fresh cards are.
Is he going to respond?
Albion, called by fusion, unknown. Okay, that's good.
Counting cards there, making sure that Sace's memory is working, but looks like we'll draw 1.
We'll go. We
Very
might as well
careful
just
here.
keep
Just doing it. Brand of Fusion. Let's go.
So there's one Toad activation.
Negate.
Here's the
Or
called by.
Yep.
negate the Toad.
All
Call by
according
on
to
the call
plan.
by, Yep, the Toad on the call by. Set both.
And then double toad effect.
That's actually why, because it cuts him off the retribution.
Oh, it does because he's not able to add it back. Very smart. We got to make sure those cards come back, though. They are using the same color sleeves.
One of the parts about this deck that I really love is when you use Toad, because of the Bishrine in your graveyard, you can sometimes pick up Atlantean or mermails that you can then use for points of interaction. You know, heavy infantry wasn't used in that previous turn, but it is in Sathe's deck, so sometimes you can add it back to your hand here so that you can use that Shrine effect during your opponent's turn. Get that extra draw, but you also discard a card to the graveyard, potentially drawing into hand interactions, but then also getting the actual interaction on the opponent's turn right then and there.
So,
Curious if he's just going to choose
And then
to do anything. Nope, doesn't look like it.
the
It is kind of funny that with all the great new water support, it got him here, but the stars have been cards that have been out for ages, right? Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome showing how powerful they are. Adding back the Abyss Sting Triania for later turns if we get that far, but now Robert's going to play.
Yeah, he has all the follow-up apps he would ever need.
Ooh, is this going to be the fusion deployment just trying to bring out Fallen of Albaz, or are we going to go for somebody else instead?
we'll reveal.
It looks like Grand Guignol, so I believe we got Blazing Cartesia at the ready.
Yes,
Even though he naturally drew the Sting and wasn't able to search it on the previous turn, he was at least able to use the Neptibus for value here on the opponent's turn. And one of the cool interactions is you really only need one Abyss equip spell to be able to essentially use it as much as you want, as long as Neptibus sits around, as we saw here.
Safe thinking for a moment there.
Attempt red. We'll target the all over that's engraved.
We're going to add it back to the hand. Haven't normal summoned yet.
Yeah. So he might not actually fusion.
I feel like normal summon the Aluber, the Jester of Despia to try to add a branded spell or trap is just such a very strong way to get back in the duel here, or at least force your opponent to try to push back against you. He's definitely got safe thinking. So many cards in hand, by the way, and so many on the field. It shows you, again, resource management. Neptibus is a good king, a great leader.
So the Retribution can at least reset the Brandon in red also during the next turn. So it'll be interesting if he chooses to fusion it. He's not. So this is also useful here because obviously now the Blazing Cartesia kind of checks the Infinite Impermanence. I think Sathe is considering here that Shrine that I had mentioned in the graveyard to see if he can get an additional draw. He doesn't have heavy infantry, so he doesn't have an interaction in his hand. So he might just be doing it to get a fresh draw to see if that produces an interaction. Yeah, this is the Shrine that had been in his graveyard. Looks like he's going to probably discard Dragoons that he had added back to his hand, or that had been in his hand. Oh no, okay, it's going to be Neptibus. This is going to allow him to draw, and this is going to activate the effect.
specials from grave.
Neptibus to special summon from the grave. It's going to put Poseidra on the field.
Activate effect.
And this is going to allow him to bounce the Blazing Cartesia back to his hand. So this is actually really phenomenal.
Targeting Cartesia.
And I kind of had forgotten that Poseidra had been in the graveyard. So this is going to force him that if he wants to use Blazing Cartesia,
Target's Cartesia. We'll attempt to chain the card.
yeah, he's going to have to do it right now, which he has the Infinite Impermanence for. Then the Alibur would hit the field and resolve, but I'm not sure if he'd be able to do anything with Branded Fusion.
Oh, we are going to just let it go. No infinite permanence here, so here's Grand Guignol.
Just chain link one.
Here's the issue, though. Look at those hands clasped together on
Level
Robert's
6 or higher
side. He
lighter
seems
dark
to have
from
nothing
main
else,
rack.
so that infinite impermanence really could shut this whole thing down.
That's assuming it was, in fact, Infinite Impermanence that we saw. I believe that's what he has set, but, you know,
And then
we'll soon out.
I mean, with 4 cards face out,
Yeah.
it may be there somewhere, right?
Well, 2 of them are Call by the Grave and Branded Fusion.
Oh, man. So powerful.
What's actually fascinating is how much Branded Fusion, or sorry, rather, Call by the Grave would actually check the Branded in red on the following turn.
Well, we're not there yet. So we're going to take a look. I think Grand Guignol is going to get to resolve.
So even if he was to use the Retribution on the Branded red, it actually wouldn't really do much. Okay, so he has the Infinite Impermanence. I really can't imagine there being much more. He can do the play that I described earlier, but again, that Call by the Grave is actually going to check him.
it's been negated first. Yeah, negates first.
That's difficult.
Let's see here. Do I have anything? I guess we'll go.
So using a Luber because the fusion monster's gone, so of course that does mean you can special summon and get some effects
we'll
negated.
attempt to target the.
You can't target.
I can't target. Then I'll target the.
Talking about a leader of his people, Mermail King Neptibus, standing in front of all those monsters. You can't target them, so you're going to have to target him.
Target. Himself back. Nice.
Yeah.
16, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just verifying that there's no hidden attack boost anywhere.
Just attack into
I mean,
it.
with a lot of effects in Mermail Atlantean, I could see why you just want to make sure, but it looks like the damage is going to be good. But just by itself, it's so many cards taken from you by your opponent. The Called by the Grave, I think, is the linchpin and how Sathe is very well teed up to close out this duel. It just takes a little bit more gas. Again,
Yes.
11 minutes left on the clock. I don't think this is going to
if
run
you
into
special monster
time,
by
so it's
monster
all about the
effect.
life points that Robert still has.
Now, I think it's so funny, the Call by the Grave just checks so many things that Robert could try and do here to potentially find a way out of this situation.
I will not use this effect.
Well, it's funny, a card usually, you know, at one and unsearchable, but Sathe found a way. I'll just
Go,
take
me
that
too.
for myself.
We will banish red and graveyard, add back to hand.
Now he
To hand.
resets it, but now again, like I mentioned, whatever he targets, it's going to be counteracted by the Call by the Grave that's set.
And I think Sathe, excuse me, just making sure, okay, yeah, that targets. I got a card for that. It's your card.
Procedures. If you need assistance with these procedures, please raise your hand and call for a judge. If you have a time extension, it begins now.
So that Cartesia adds back to hand.
Stand by main.
So hitting the main phase here. Sathe's going to have to push forward. It's an opportunity to close this duel out now. Let's see if he takes it.
Yeah, he's got a myriad of different ways I think that he'll be able to achieve that. It's just a matter of kind of constructing the way that,
And if I special by monster effect, not spell a trap.
that he honestly settles on at this point. He's got just so many different options. He's got the Sting, which is another revive. He's got multiple Atlantean and Mermail effects that he can activate. And he's got Tias, he's got Dragoons.
Main phase.
I'll move that.
All right, so we're going to banish. Brand of Retribution.
So we'll start with a normal summon of Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince.
Such a great card. I mean, so many historical cards. Being able to send for cost.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. The interactions with Dragoons, which allows him to get Trine, that if he could potentially put into the graveyard, he might have another point of interaction if there is an opponent's turn.
Now, granted, of course it sends for cost because that's the whole concept of this deck.
Yeah, of
but
course.
It's very, very powerful that you can't really stop.
Yeah, it reminds me of
coming
Haggard
next.
Lizardois just in how it lines up in certain formats. So we see the Minstrel effect, even though that Blazing Cortesia is going to return back to the hand during the end phase, this is just another way of getting a Dragoon activation. What's interesting here is he's kind of exhausted all of the Mermail-based, at least most of the Mermail-based seed monsters and extra deck monsters. Looks like he does have Abyss Gaius, which I was actually curious to see whether or not Mermail Atlantean players would be cutting that this weekend, just by virtue of the new Abyssrite, the Atlantean Spirit, and kind of what that does for the strategy.
Attack first, 1,000.
Okay, so he's
Still going to battle.
24 and
46, 8, puts you at 38. Main phase 2.
Interesting there that he, rather that Robert didn't choose to try to activate the Brand of Red, of course knowing that his own Call by the Grave is set to Sathe's field, but by clearing out the Aluber, even if another card is drawn next turn, the only thing you're going to have is Blazing Cartesia, so it really makes that Brand of Red just sit there. But two monsters go to the graveyard. Oh, wow. Is that who I think it is?
of course, it's the big fish, as
It's
sometimes it's called.
Coelacanth. Oh, my goodness. What a powerful card that I feel like didn't get its time in the sun when it was first released, but it's great to see it bringing out the fish right now. And
Rank
ultimate
it.
rare.
Banishes here for
that's
cost.
my best play here.
You haven't done Coelacanth's effect yet.
Or else I would have done
For those
more.
who aren't in the know, discarding to summon as many fish as you want. It's pretty fun.
We'll attempt to trigger the Quim on some.
So there-
Yeah, after
And then what will Quim do?
Quim dumped a card that mentions Fallen About This from the deck.
Okay.
I wonder if there's a way just to preemptively call by the grave, ring and all. and then do things in main phase 1 that would have put 8,000 on the board. You know, I was trying to mention prior to him entering the battle phase, which kind of took me a bit by surprise. You know, we have got a few differing Abyss and just water monsters in general, from Keeper to Dragite to White Aura Porpoise, kind of a myriad of these just additional water-based extra deck monsters that sometimes you use to actually deal 8,000 damage after your main mermail Atlantean cards kind of generate the card advantage early on. But one of the things that is just worth pointing out, I guess, is that he's exhausted his Totally Awesome package, so whatever he does from this point forward is going to be with some of the additional extra deck monsters, though Abyss Dweller is probably going to be sufficient enough just because of its historical nature lining up against branded and Despian-based cards.
Well, it does have a water material too, so it is boosting up monsters, so pushing for game is getting easier and easier. But we are main phase 2 right now. Had to just do a little battle and go build a board for next turn. But I would say that feels pretty good to have Abyss Dweller there, and it's
underneath the net, yeah, that cannot be targeted.
Always had a really good synergy with this deck because remember, you are detaching material as cost, so you are activating those additional water monster effects. So it's almost like, and I'm sure water players aren't going to like to hear this, but it reminds me of Labyrinth a lot. It's that don't let your player or your opponent keep playing, because as they do, it just gets murkier and murkier. You're never going to get out of it.
So now we're going to use the big fish, so Coelacanth.
Good old super deep sea king Coelacanth, just
yeah.
insane. Not getting 5 fish onto the field, but still getting 2 monsters out there can make for an easy Link summon, Xyz summon.
Yeah, 2 copies of Abyss Pike. This gives him 2 additional level 4 water monsters. Again, he's already gone through that Totally Awesome package, so this is probably going to be Abyss Keeper. Okay, no, he's going to go into another Link. Let's see, what else does he have left? He doesn't have many options. Okay, yeah, Abyss Keeper, sorry.
Okay, so the materials need to be something different there.
It is a Link.
We've dwelled on the Abyss. I guess it's time to keep it too.
Bench.
Yep, so this is a banish effect. So that will get rid of Tasia.
Oh, and there's the triple tactics.
Yeah, so this is because the Granganol has been activated.
So it does look like Sathe, powerful as this combo might be, he is receiving a slow play minor warning, so you may see the clock jump up by an additional 3 minutes there. As long as it was his first penalty of the day, nothing major here. It happens when you have a complex deck like that. But again, you do have to keep pace here. It is a competition, not just the game.
He has just run out of Dragoon's targets. That is an impressive. Let's always put that as a challenge when you play this deck, is can I actually search every single copy of
And he did.
a monster I can search with Dragoons?
Getting that Abyss Triania again, that's going to really be powerful.
Let's go. Attempt red. Target a looper.
Ooh, is it time for the Called by the Grave?
I think you probably do. He's under Dweller already. I don't really know. You know, I'm trying to think if you don't do this, what's
the worst that could happen? Yeah.
The thing is, like, Called by is going to stop things that Dweller stops. Do you know what I mean? Dweller's already active, so what else could hit the graveyard that's not an effect that's similar to this?
Well, it could be that he just wants to make sure those monsters' effects, like something like another Aluber, the Jester of Despia, or maybe get rid of Fallen of Albaz in advance. But it looks like he went for the Jester this time. 18 to 18, okay. Oh, and there's the handshake. The Dapper Duelist goes out in style. But Sathe takes a win with a very powerful and beautiful collection of Mermail Atlantean cards.
Yeah, he even has the ultimate rare, super ancient Deep Sea King, Coelacanth.
Yeah, there you go. What a name, and what a duel we got to see. The crowd sitting there doing a wave of their own, actually. It's just really cool to see that, again, in a format where there's so many light and dark monsters, because, again, that's why the Bystials are doing so well. Sathe flexing his muscles there and showing that there are other attributes in this game.
Yeah, the water monsters, it's really Moulin Glacia to me. Moulin Glacia, since the moment the Mermail Atlantean strategy was released, has been the #1 most powerful card, in my opinion.
It's insane. I mean, all of those monsters that required 5 of a single attribute in the graveyard had very powerful effects, right? Being able to, think about Grand Soil, being able to bring stuff
to Monster Reborn.
So good. And, some of them have been good, some of them have been greater, but Moulin Glacia, I mean, it's Delinquent Duo, discarding 2 cards. for practically free, right? Because the deck wants to have water monsters in the graveyard, wants to get another water material in the field for a Link summon. It's insane. It's insane.
The interaction of Dragoons with Mooling Glacier has obviously always been powerful. You can get to 5 with complete ease, and if you go above, it's very easy to manipulate back down to 5. You know, we just saw the consistency of his deck with so much engine in his deck. He's essentially going to be able to do something very similar every single time he goes first. Sometimes when he has the copy of Minstrel, he can also get rid of any of the other hand interactions. I'll look at him doing the swimming motion there.
Robert got a smile on his face, though. Big round of applause for him, though, because he definitely hung in there with the cards that he had. And that's the thing about the Fallen of Elbaz strategy. You have so many different combo pieces, so many different keys. You have to figure out which doors they unlock. And if you just can't get to it or the key breaks in the keyhole, then you just have to call it quits. But he did a great job and put on a great performance for sure. So good luck to him for the rest of the tournament. Just good stuff, though, across the board. This tournament's been so cool. You know, to show that the first YCS of the year, mega attendance, right? 2,223 players. Just
Actually,
insane. And now
with
more,
the VIPs,
right? Yeah.
I think it got up to somewhere about 2270.
I think
just about.
2274, yeah. So well over 2,000 players. Lots of different decks up here, really being able to flex their muscles, just like Sathe is, right? But it just shows you that, like, just like Billy was saying earlier that this is going to be a great year for Yu-Gi-Oh! I kind of believe him. I think this is going to be a great year for Yu-Gi-Oh! So just a lot of excitement across the board. But that said, you have to think about where you go from here, right? If you're a successful mermail duelist, you still have to grind it out against a bunch of different Malice players. Maybe there's a bunch of Fiendsmith, Ryzel. There's also a lot of other stuff we haven't been able to feature in the tournament so far.
Yeah, there's plenty of other decks out there. You know, walking up and down, we've seen decks like Memento or a little bit here at the top table, so there'll be plenty more as the tournament goes on that we'll be able to feature.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything that we haven't seen in a while that really surprised you as we've been walking around and kind of, you know, seeing what decks people are playing? Not to spoil any surprises, but just stuff you're like, wow, that can still do it.
I don't know if I'd quite put it on that level. I mean, I'm really interested in the Atlantean deck.
It's fair.
I
Did a
definitely
great
favor
performance.
a lot of these sort of older cards like Dragoons. It's really exciting to be able to play a card like that.
Yeah.
Whenever that deck goes first, it just looks so powerful. One of my actually close friends is playing a Mermail Atlantean deck. He was a VIP. He had actually used the deck in order to get his VIP status into the weekend, so he already started off 2-0. I actually saw him playing Cam Neal in round 3. I don't know how it went, but I'm curious to ask him how that matchup went.
Yeah, the thing, too, is that, you know, as much fun as we get to have up here, there's a whole tournament out there with 2,000 plus people. And so it really is like a convention experience. If you've been to any gaming conventions or anime conventions or something like that, it's not just the tournament here. There's public events, there's other tournaments to enter, there's stuff like that. And it's just so cool that the first start of the year is so big and has like so much good energy, especially coming off of YCS Anaheim last year.
I'm personally excited just to see the Mitsurugi deck a little bit more. I feel like the first time we saw it in the feature match area, it didn't quite really get to show off what it does. So
It didn't scream Year of the
No,
Snake, yeah.
It's such an impressive deck. That's what I'm really looking forward to seeing in the feature match area soon.
Yeah. Speaking of the feature match area, I think it's time to throw it over to Stephen Kangas so we can hear about Mr. Muscles himself, Sathe, and his victory.
Thank you very much, casters. I'm here on stage with Sathe. Congratulations on your feature match win, piloting a very unique deck. We haven't seen this yet in one of the feature matches to date, the new Atlantean cards. I gotta ask, because there's probably a lot of people out there, this is their first time really getting to see a very strong duelist pilot it. What's the ideal opening? What's the goo for a deck like this?
So the deck can play with as many cards as you have. So there's a lot of openings. The most standard opening is what you saw game 1. So my first 4 cards were actually Imperm, Ash. Luckily, I got the Neptibus. So what you guys saw there was truly the 1-card Neptibus combo, and that's the most standard combo game 1.
Okay, well, how do you feel about your play overall then up on the feature match stage? Were nerves taking an effect at all?
Okay, I don't know about nerves. I am just not the best duelist, right? I had no idea what Branded Despia did, I'll be so honest with you guys. And so I'm sure you're like, why didn't he do this? Why didn't you do this? Why wasn't he going for game here? I fooed this guy game 2, and he full comboed me. So game 3, I'm like, I don't want to do anything that lets him full combo me on my turn. So that's why my interactive play right there was not so great. I didn't know what was happening.
It's okay, you still played well. Happy to see you up on stage. But off stage, you mentioned you're a lawyer. So I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Requires a lot of reading as well. I'm assuming being a lawyer requires reading. What do you think is harder, more complicated, being a lawyer or understanding Yu-Gi-Oh?
Can I tell you a really quick story?
Yeah.
So when I entered into law school, you have to do a personal letter. And for the personal letter, I actually talked about how, you know, the law, you have to be very in-depth, read the law, every comment period matters. And I indicated that I was actually a Yu-Gi-Oh! Judge. And so I could read the colons, the semicolons, and decipher what PSCT was. So because I was good at being a Yu-Gi-Oh! Judge, I said I could be a lawyer, and they said it was the most unique personal letter they've ever seen.
All right, if you can be a Yu-Gi-Oh judge, you can be a lawyer. Congratulations, Sathe. You've been flexing a lot. We'll do one of those together while we send it back over to the casters.